Go ahead.
Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone. Welcome to this month's Power Board meeting. I think we've got Andy and Todd are both online with us, joining us this month with our meeting. And we also have Mark online, but I think he just stepped away, so he'll be back. So let's go ahead and get started, and we can get some of the other points of the meeting done. And we'll start off. Again, welcome everybody, and let's start off with item number 1, which is approval of the agenda. Did everyone get a chance to look that over, and is there any questions, comments?
I'll go ahead and make a motion that we approve tonight's agenda.
Okay, we have a motion.
Second that motion. Andy.
Andy did the second, Dick did the first. So Todd, would you start us on a vote?
Sure. Spriggs, aye.
Andy?
Palmer, aye.
Dick?
Saunders, aye.
And Dinsmore, aye. Okay, thank you. Item number 2 is the approval of last month's minutes. Did everyone get a chance to look through those? Is there a question, comments, concerns? Any changes that we need to make on those, or?
No.
If there's none, I'm just looking for a motion then.
I will go ahead and motion to approve last month's minutes.
Okay, I think that was Andy, correct?
Correct.
I'll second it. This is Todd.
Okay, Todd did a second, Andy did a motion. Dick, would you start us on a vote?
Saunders, aye.
Todd?
Spriggs, aye.
Andy?
Palmer, aye.
And Dinsmore, aye. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Okay, item number 3, our new business. First item that we need to cover new business is our 2025 schedule. So if everyone looked through that, it looks like there are 2 months that we're not doing a meeting due to schedule conflicts, and 1 month that we're not doing it due to election. So does the dates look okay for everybody on those?
Yep, look good.
Okay, motion.
Yep, looks good.
A motion to go with that schedule next year.
I'll go ahead and make a motion that we approve the Power Board meeting schedule for 2025.
I'll second that motion.
So I think Andy second, Dick did the first. So Todd, would you start a vote?
Yep, Spriggs, aye.
Andy,
Palmer, aye.
Dick,
Saunders, aye.
and Dinsmore, aye. Okay. All right, next item. Mark, did you get back on yet?
Yeah, I think I'm on. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Okay. Well, I'm going to turn it over, we're going to look at a 2024 impact fee study presentation. Rick Hansen and Mark.
I'll do just I guess more of a quick reminder. I believe it was back in, oh goodness, when was it? I want to say July, August, we went through the capital facilities plan that ICPE had done. And then we also looked at the capital improvement facilities plan, capital facilities. What am I missing there, Mark? What's the right acronym?
Oh, the impact, well.
Impact fee facilities plan, IFFP.
Yeah.
And so that's a subset of projects from the larger plan that are strictly related to growth. We can only use impact fees on growth, new growth. We can't do system maintenance or system, I guess we can increase capacity, but we can't do maintenance with impact fees. So we had the broader plan that covered pretty much almost everything. We narrowed it down to the impact fee projects, and then that's when we engaged UFS to help us with the actual coming up with the dollars for the impact fee. And the project costs are based on what ICPE put together in those two previous plans. So that's the input that we gave to Mark and his group to be able to develop this study. So it's all consistent all the way through. So with that, I'll let Mark take over with his slides, and then be sure and ask any questions. And I'm sure Mark will answer them. Go ahead, Mark.
Well, thank you. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes,
Yes.
we
Oh,
can in the
perfect.
council. Hopefully online you can as well.
Right. And I just wanted to kind of summarize everything before I get into the details. Um, excuse me. My name is Mark Boshaw. I'm president of Utility Financial Solutions, and we do quite a bit of work in Utah. And we did this update of the impact fee analysis back in 2020. And this is an update of that analysis. And one of the things that we've seen, especially in the last couple of years, is Utah is an area that's been experiencing a lot of growth. And because of the growth, we're having to expand transmission lines, substations in different areas of the state and it's having a pretty substantial impact on the impact fees. We've seen bringing those up quite a bit throughout the state. And just to give you an idea why we have an impact fee is when we add customers, we want to try to make sure that growth is good for everyone, that doesn't harm existing ratepayers. And there's both good and bad that comes with the growth. The bad, in a sense, you want to call it that, is the capital investments. And the good is when those customers come online and we're providing electricity to them, there's a certain built into the rates is a certain what's called fixed cost recovery. And so what we do is we look at the impacts that they're creating on the system and those costs. And then we reduce those impacts by the benefits that the existing customers are going to see over the next several years. And so we net it out to come up with the impact fee. So what we're trying to identify is that break-even point, so to speak, where we're being fair to new customers, but we're not harming existing ratepayers. So what you're going to see as I go through this is about a 9% increase in the impact fees between residential and small commercial. And this study was done 3 years ago, so that would be about 3% annual increase in that area, which is pretty reasonable. But in the large commercial, we've seen a 20% increase. And that's driven by several factors. One of the most significant is over the past 3 years, we've had rate reductions, slight rate reductions of about 1% a year to bring them more in line with cost of service. And of course, when we do that, what's happening is from a rate setting standpoint, of course, the rates are lower. But from an impact fee analysis, there's less contribution margins being generated from those customers. So the subtraction from the capital investments that's needed is reduced for that class. And as a result, they're seeing an increase of 20% in their impact fees. And again, this is not existing customers, it's new customers and to handle growth. So before I get into the details, I just want to ask if there's any questions that anybody has about what an impact fee does or what our process was.
No, I don't.
So what I'm going to go through is defining the impact fee and why it's needed, and how we determine the impact fees, and then the results of the impact fee analysis. Of course, all of these have given a brief summary of all of these at the start. But the impact fee, as I said, we want to make sure growth pays for growth. And so we look at how much infrastructure is needed to handle certain sizes of service. And we apportion the capital investments that are needed for the growth to the different capacity needs of the different types of customers. We then take, as I mentioned before, we look at the value that that customer brings to the system in the form of contribution margins or fixed cost recovery within the rate. And we do that by separating out in the cost of service study what we call variable components, which is primarily power supply cost, and fixed recovery cost, which is primarily for infrastructure investments. And it's the fixed investment recovery that we're giving back to the new customers, a portion of it, I should say, back to the new customers. So what you're seeing here is the impact fee capital investment projects. Pointer here. This is the different capital programs you have planned. And I believe if you added all this up, I think it's around $8 or $9 million in total. And we then take that and we look at when those investments are going to be made and what percent of that investment is actually related to growth. Because sometimes we're making investments, capital investments, to replace existing infrastructure or to enhance existing infrastructure, not necessarily to expand it. So we just look at what the expansion costs are that we want attributed to these new customers. Now, each service level, the type of services, have different amperages and volts associated with them. Like residential is traditionally a 100 amp service. Some customers maybe 200 amp and or even 400 amp. But we start with a base of the 100 amp service, and of course they want a 400 amp, and you'll see this in the rate schedules that they're going to pay a higher amount for the 400 amp service. But this is the different base of numbers we start with. Small commercials, 120 amp, 240 volt, single phase. Large commercial, they can have different types of service. They're traditionally 3-phase service, and they can be 120 volts or 480 amp, 277 volts. And the schedule that we develop is developed in a manner that's proportional to whatever they elect. I mean, these are just examples, but they may elect something different. And the fee schedule has listed all the different variations that it can take on the services. Before I get into this part of it, which is the rates themselves, is there any questions about the capital plan or the size of the services?
I mean, these that are shown in here are the most common.
Yes.
Say somebody comes up with something in between, it's basically a proportion. It's a real easy calculation to figure out what they should be. You mostly see that on commercial as opposed to residential. So.
Yeah, like residential is traditionally around a 200 amp service in many places. But for a 100 amp service, the current fee is $13.87. we're proposing about $150 increase to 1517, which is a 9% overall increase in that impact fee. And we get into like residential apartments that are three-phase. If they want 100 amp service, the fee goes up to from 2081 up to 2278. And all of these are about a 9% increase. So this is the residentials. When it comes to the small commercial, again, they're going to see a 9% increase. These tend to be single phase, smaller services, single phase. And if they're like a 200 amp service, their impact fee would go from 44.39 to 48.50. So it's again a 9% increase. When it comes to large commercial, this is the ones that have seen the biggest increases. These are traditionally three-phase service, and the reason the increase is higher, as I mentioned earlier, it's because over the last several years, we've given them slight decreases each year, which is reducing our fixed cost recovery, causing these numbers to be higher. So like an 800 amp service, for example, they're currently paying around 26,651. That number would go up to $32,000 or about a 20% increase. Overall, I'll be honest with you, these numbers are smaller in comparison to others that we've done in Utah in the last couple of years. It's a lot more consistent. Not that substantial of an impact. So is there any questions about these schedules? The next steps on this is to submit this to the state, our report to the state, to get their okay on it after your approval.
Actually, it's the city council that approves it. There's nothing at the state level that I'm aware of.
Oh, there isn't.
Yeah. It just
Oh,
goes-
that's right. It's Heber City's at the state level they got to go to.
Yeah.
Okay.
If
Yeah.
you're under the PSC jurisdiction, you'd have to, but we're not. So the
Okay.
council, our next and final, I guess, approval.
Okay. Is there any questions or concerns? Like I said, these numbers are going up. Infrastructure costs are going up everywhere. In the last 3 years, they've gone up substantially. And these increases, even the 20%, believe it or not, even though that counts about 7.5% a year or 6.5%, it's still in the range of reasonableness. And the rates that we're charging them have come down and have decreased over the last few years.
On the residential side, as I looked through everything, it looked reasonable as far as the increase there. The commercial obviously seems like a big jump, but you're saying that's pretty common across the state. But that amount of an increase, or that increase is smaller than what you're seeing across with other municipalities across the state.
It is, yes. The last several that we've done, they've been in excess of 20%.
Does that
And
increase?
a lot of that,
I was going to ask Rick,
yeah,
does that increase kind of compared to the other departments with the city that they're having to do?
I wish Jeremy was here on that, to be honest. I'm not sure.
Okay. And that's something we can
surprised me.
ask then as it goes
Yeah.
to city council or check into
Yeah,
and stuff.
Jeremy would know that, or Blake, so. I haven't worried a whole lot about theirs.
Okay.
But
Yeah, the only question I would have is in reference to other municipalities in our locale that were competitive
yeah,
commercial. I wouldn't want to have our commercial so high that it would be a deterrent to somebody wanting to locate in Washington City.
Exactly.
But I think Rick was saying before the meeting when I asked him that we are competitive as far as he knows.
Dave, how hard is it for me to flip over to a screen?
It's not. I just have to stop. I'm gonna end. I'll have to end his presentation if I do it. Is that fine?
Come back. if
That's
need
probably
be,
okay.
right?
I can come back. Yeah. I'm gonna
'Cause
I'm gonna
Rachel
present real
helped me.
quick.
She did all the legwork.
Okay. So I'm gonna share just for a second now, Mark, and then I will swap.
And we put together a table that kind of shows, I gotta share that, don't I?
Yep. As soon as you connect. There we go.
Okay, can you see this, Mark, as well?
I can. It's a little small for me, but I can see it.
So again, these are our current and proposed fees, and you can see we're nearly on a 200 amp service, nearly 2,000 less than St. George. So this is one area that we're actually lower than Santa Clara. Hurricane, there is a footnote. They elected to only recover 75%. So their number, it would be like taking our 3,000 and only collecting 75% of that. So their number's artificially low by choice. Okay. So Rachel said she had chatted with Hurricane, and they're in the process of evaluating theirs. And so, didn't you say St. George was in the similar boat, that they haven't changed since the last time we did it, but they're in the process of.
So those St. George fees on here are 3-year ago fees?
Yes.
And our new proposed rate is
Less.
significantly less. I mean, half in some cases of what St. George is currently.
So you looked at, you questioned or wondered about the commercial.
And it looks, we're very competitive,
Again, we're very competitive across the board.
at least with St. George, and that's who our main
And
competitor.
Hurricane has the advantage of having that all land to try to build up that growth, which they're
Yeah.
probably trying to incentivize.
Right, and so that's, a conscious decision, and of course, we could do the same thing. I wouldn't recommend doing it, because then your existing customers are having to make that up. Is the bottom line, so.
No, I think like Dick said, we just want to make sure that we're giving the city every opportunity to be able to promote and not
Yeah,
hurt
that
that
was my
promotion
concern.
and
Yeah,
stuff.
so we're not out of line with adjacent. In fact, I think overall, we're on the lower end of the group
My
in
other,
the county.
my other question I've got is we look at residential and lump everything into residential. Does the fact that we have the timeshare, the VRBO stuff that we've got, does that hurt our that we just classified as a residential? The fact that it's kind of a demand situation where they may not be in a home, but they show up, expect full service for the short time they're here, and then they leave. Does that make sense of what I'm wondering?
Yeah, I mean, so in a way, they really are a business, but the way it currently is set up, they're billed on a residential, so. No, there's been no distinction at this point, and I think when we get AMI data, we might be able to get a little better idea. However, we don't have a good track on who's a Verbo or those. I mean, you kind of know the general areas on some of them, but we don't flag a permit that said, or an account that said this is a rental property, so.
Okay.
But you're right, I mean, they're not gonna get charged based on kilowatt hour, so they're gonna go in and crank the air conditioner down or the heater way up, and they don't really care what it costs the owner, so. But
Okay. I don't have any other questions. That's
And
all.
then just as another comparison as far as our costs, these are four of the main pieces of equipment between our current Grapevine substation and what our last substation was, Staley, in 2020, which is basically 4 years. You can see the transformers 195%, the circuit breakers 267, regulators 241%, and reclosers 219% of what it was 4 years ago. So 9 and 20% is pretty good in my mind. So, and these are just the main components that I had readily available. So just to give you an idea, I mean, our cost, but again, you know, Mark looks at a lot of things more than just those costs. 90%, I do have Mark's slides here. When he had that list of projects here, the vast majority of those projects are related to the Grapevine substation. The transmission lines, the substation itself, the main distributions to get that capacity out, with the exception of the underbuild and really the last two. The rest of them are pretty much associated with that project, and we're well positioned. You know, we're going to be, I mean, we're somewhat landlocked at this point. We got the Habitat on one side, St. George on the other, the river on the south, Hurricane on the other side, and we're, I would suspect between 5 to 10 years we'll be fairly well built out. I mean, we'll still have growth, but as far as large projects, there's not a lot of large tracts of land left that haven't already, are in some form of development currently. So
this is probably the last substation that we would.
well, I think the next step beyond this will be we've configured or planned that the Parkway, the Grapevine, and Staley subs have room to put a second transformer in. Instead of finding a new site, we can expand capacity at an existing site. So the advantage of that is you're not going to have to build transmission to get to that new site. And
Yeah, all the infrastructure's there.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's how we've done our planning. Main Street, we could change out the transformers. There are smaller ones. We could put bigger ones in there. So I think we're in good position. And I think that's one of the reasons why our fees are lower than some of the adjacent ones, or even Dixie, is we don't have to build 5 miles of line to get to a new site, and those kind of things. So we're pretty compact, and we already have lines relatively close.
Rick, if I remember right, like 15 years ago, you had a major transmission project, which I think that's, you're seeing the benefits of those now because of the capacity that was added. I might be wrong about that, Rick. I'm an accountant, not an engineer. I'm just talking from memory.
No, you're exactly right. Back in I think a lot of that occurred just before the 07, 08 kind of bust. So they built Coral Canyon, Sienna Hills, the transmission line that goes out there, the line that goes up to Main Street across the freeway. They put a lot of, so they built Buena Vista, Sienna Hills, Coral Canyon, and the transmission lines associated with them. And then the load kind of dropped off, or the growth at least cooled quite a bit. So you had a lot of capacity. When I started in 2017, Sienna Hills was by far our lowest loaded substation, and now it's our either one or two, depending on how we have circuits configured. And so that whole growth in this middle part, so the capacity was already there. And so basically that's already at a 15-year-old cost, if you will, that capacity that's already in there. And like I told Dick, our actual impact fee fund, if you want to call it that, is actually negative because we have to build that infrastructure prior to the load being there, so you're kind of always playing catch up. The theory is if it all builds out as planned perfectly, you'd get all the impact fees and all that would be paid for, and you'd land at a nice zero balance, but there's a lot of assumption that goes in, but that's the basic idea. Any other questions for Mark? What and I've talked to Jeremy, what our current plan is on this is to let the power board chew on this for a month, and in January is when we would actually make the recommendation to the council to proceed. And so if there's any questions that come up in the interim, we can get a hold of Mark, we can get answers. And then obviously in January, you'd have another opportunity to ask questions at Power Board, but that's when we do the recommendation to the council. Then we'll probably do a workshop with the council. We're thinking the second meeting in January, and then probably do the public hearing and the approval with the council, probably the first meeting in February is kind of our tentative plan. And then I believe by statute, Tara was helping me refresh my memory, I think. So when you adopt it, then you have to have at least a 90-day period before it actually goes into effect. So in reality, if we approved it in February, it'd be somewhere around probably June is when it would go into actual effect, when people come in with their building permits. Hopefully that lays out the basic plan. So it's not intended to drop this on you and say, hey, you gotta do an approval tonight. Sometimes we end up doing that to you, but we'll let you do some Christmas thinking, And then the first of the year, I don't know when our meeting is, but that first one in January is where we'll change it from just a discussion to an actual action item.
Okay.
Anything else?
Any other questions or comments?
Good presentation. I think it all made sense.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. And now he comes in.
Guys.
And then,
Were you waiting for me to start?
Yeah.
and then Mark, there's also a more formal report that they'll provide that we'll have before the next meeting as well. It generates the same, it's where the numbers come from, but it has a little more text and stuff that goes with it.
Yeah.
They had a question I couldn't answer before, Jeremy. Yeah, they were just curious of what the other impact fees have been adjusted in semi-recent history. Like water and parks.
Be on the low side of the adjustments we've done in the last couple of years.
Okay. That's kind of what I thought, but I didn't know for sure.
I'd have to give you the real numbers, but this would be the low side.
Okay. No, thanks, Jeremy. Okay, well, then if no other comments, and if you do have any questions, just get a hold of Rick and we
Yeah.
can discuss that at the next meeting stuff. So if something comes up, just email Rick and then we'll add it into the agenda when we talk about it next month and stuff. So, all right, we'll go on to item number C, the next item, the 2024 post-peak report and review.
Okay, Mark, I'm sure you
Thank you, everybody.
Yes.
you can stay
Thank
on if
you.
you want, but
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks. Yeah, bye-bye.
okay, thank you. This report is one that basically happens at the end of, or Rocky Mountain takes the primary lead since they're the transmission supplier to the county. But basically all 7 utilities have input and provide data and different things. And it basically is, how did last summer go? How did the system perform? What did the loads do? And the bigger question or next question is, well, what do we think they're going to do next year, kind of thing. And so they presented this at the October Southwest Technical Task Force meeting. And this is their slide deck. If you want to really get into the weeds a bit, I can send you the actual report. Just let me know if you need that for holiday reading as well. So the Washington County area peaked on July 11th, which was a Thursday, at 640.5 megawatts. They call it hour ending 18, which is between 5 and 6 o'clock. And this is just a graph of the load in the county from June 1st to the end of August. And you can see we had a few days in there and a little spike here in August. So what that was, last year we were at 605 and this year basically at 641. So 36 megawatt increase, which is roughly a little more than half of like what our city load would be. And that's spread out over the whole county. So you can see it's an interesting pattern to look at this. You can see we have a steep and then you kind of level off and then it goes up and then you kind of level off and then it goes up and you level off, and it's kind of been the historic pattern. And this breaks out, and so this was the load on the system, net of generation, which means there was more load there with generation on, or no, excuse me. Sorry, the net is the 445, the 641 is with generation. This red says, I don't know if I can read that. I think it's 196 megawatts of generation. The biggest portion of that is the St. George 2 combustion turbines they have over at Mill Creek. Then there's our generation. Hurricane has some, Santa Clara, and Deseret has some on Dixie system now too.
So 2024 was a pretty substantial decline in generation from previous years, according to this chart.
Yes, and I forgot also it includes the solar that comes in from the enterprise area into Red Butte. And so on this particular day, there was something going on with solar up 30 miles north. The generation came down, and so that just shows what happens with that intermittent resource. But you're right, that's a good observation. But yeah, that's because of the solar. And I think we'll see that he has another chart here.
But they don't expect it to happen next year because they thought it was an anomaly this year.
You never can predict, if you got a cloud cover 30, 40 miles away and it's still full sun here, that's what happens. So this gray line is the overall total load in the county. The blue line is, we call it the net load, which is what the transformers at Central and Red Butte see. And you can see the system peaks earlier than the system total occurs at the 5 to 6 o'clock, but the system peak actually happens later because solar drops off faster than the load does, so it comes up. And then this yellow was the solar, and you can see there was some funky things going on in the solar. Could be clouds. They could have had some issues with some of those plants up there. And again, these are merchant plants that PacifiCorp buys from.
This isn't solar behind the meter.
No.
This is just solar on there. This is all transmission.
Yeah, this is, I think there's nearly 200 megawatts of solar up there. So very large solar installations. Yeah. So all these loads would be, I guess, net of the rooftop solar. So rooftop solar would say if our rooftop solar was 2 megawatts, it would be 2 megawatts higher. And you got St. George and Santa Clara and everybody. So in reality, there's probably, I would guess, 5 or 6 megawatts at least above that from rooftop solar if the clouds came here, kind of thing. But yeah, you can see the challenge, and then the system has to respond just the opposite because the load doesn't change. And so it has to make that up. As the solar drops, the net load goes up. And then you can see the St. George large units, they just graphed here as the orange line at the bottom. Got any questions? Let me know. And so this 570 number is, right now, there's 3 transformers. 2 in Central, which is the one UAMPS owns, and 1 at Red Butte that Rocky Mountain owns. So the 570 reflects if one of those transformers fail, which is the larger one that Rocky Mountain has, we would be limited to the capacity of the remaining 2, and that's this 570. And so we were about 83% of that. And if nothing changes, you see we start getting really close in 27, 28. They do have a transformer addition planned. They say it's 26, but in reality, we got out of them, it was December of 26, so it's, in reality, it's more like summer of 27 is where that, so we're cutting about as close as we can get. And again, that's based on projected loads, so depending on what the temperature does, we could be higher or lower than what's shown. There were some interesting things this summer. We had the longest streak above 100 degrees from, what was that, like June 21st to August 8th or 9th. So the peak of 113 degrees wasn't extremely high, meaning we have hit 114, 115. And it doesn't sound a lot, but like a degree would probably make 10, 15, 20 megawatts difference. I mean, it really, just a degree makes a huge difference on the overall system load. So that was the longest streak that we've had since this study's been going. So this was the average summer temperature. Again, we weren't horribly out of line, other than 2023 was really low compared to what we saw last year. And so we were up there in the upper third of the high temperatures. Precipitation, there wasn't a lot, so we're low there. But I think this one is one of the reasons why people's bills were higher in the summer, was because the average low temperature was the highest it's ever been, which means your air conditioner didn't shut off at night like you would normally hope or think. So during the day, it wasn't dramatically different, but at night, it never really cooled off. And this is just different graphs kind of showing somewhat of the same thing. So it was the highest number of hours above 100 degrees. And so this little highlighted one was last year compared to the others. So we had more temperatures or hours above 106 degrees than any other year. And then when we got above that, it kind of gets in this muddled area, not a whole lot different. And then again, this showed kind of the same thing, that we had a lot of temperatures in the 110, but we didn't get to the 114 range where we have seen in the past. And this is that consecutive streak that we had 49 days. And then we had not a lot of consecutive days afterward. These other years, they had a 38-day run, and then they came and had a 8-day run how this graph kind of shows it. So we had a lot of 100-degree days, and we had warm nights, and so that again drives. We had a lot of calls, people saying, "Well, I kept my thermostat the same as it was last year." Well, your thermostat responds to the difference in temperature of outside to inside. It didn't cool off at night, and so it was running longer than what it typically does. So this was just showing what the predicted loads are. The original prediction was 663. We were at 641. Again, within reason based on temperature. If we would have got to that 114 or so, I think this would have been very much in the realm of possibility. And this is kind of what, again, they project for the future, and it's broken out with the light blue Pacificor, Rocky Mountain, Deseret, which is Dixie, and then Garcane serves Hilldale and Twin Cities, or Hilldale and Colorado City. So that's the light tan, and then the gray is the UAMPS total of what they're predicting. So probably there's two main things that will come up in the not too distant future is they'll modify the RAS. Right now, there could be some interesting things if one of the transmission line trips. So if we loop all the 138s together, we could withstand a single line failure and nobody would even have an outage at the 138 level, not the 69. And then the 2026 that I was mentioned, Rocky Mountain will be putting a new transformer at St. George Sub in 2026, but it's late 2026, so it won't be there for the peak of 26. And we've been told that transformer's on order. Things are in the works for that to happen. So record days above 100, record low temperatures, which translates to record cooling degree days. But the system held together, and we'll keep our fingers crossed every summer. That's never going to go away. So, any questions on that? And I know there were articles at KSL, and I think I shared one of those at one of the previous meetings that Washington County and other surrounding counties had the highest temperature on record for this last summer, so, or hottest average temperatures. So, any questions?
No?
No?
Clear as mud?
Yeah. It was interesting to see that the low temperatures were as high as they were, in fact, record highs.
Dramatically. Yeah.
Compared to previous years. That I didn't realize. But then now thinking back on it, yeah, the air conditioner was on a lot at night during the summer, so.
Yeah. So, I mean, by far, I mean, we were on average, probably around 2 degrees warmer than the warmest before. And again, it doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're trying to cool stuff, it makes a big, big difference. So, and there is, I don't know, is there a trend here up this way? Don't know. So I just share that with you for information when you get questions. I know it's December and we're talking about July, but that's how long it takes to gather all the data. And like I say, they're usually presented in October. Because really the system, we had what was it, until about the 10th or 11th of October, we were still over 100 degrees. So, I mean, 6 weeks ago, we were 100 degrees. So we didn't have much of a fall. We just kind of jumped over fall.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments? Okay, thanks, Rick. We will go on to item number 4, which is our regular business, our operations report and generation updates.
And I'll try to be relatively quick and just touch on a few highlights. Growth continues to occur, you know, we're setting new meters all the time. That's not seeming to change. One piece of good news we received from one of the transformer manufacturers was that single-phase transformer lead times are actually starting to come down into 6-month-ish kind of thing. So I guess it's better than 18 months. Three-phase transformers, which will be for our commercial, they said are still 2 years, 18 months to 2 years. So, which presents a challenge for people coming in, and it's a challenge across the country. It's not just here, it's everywhere. So, so that's as close to supply chain good news as we've had in a while. The natural gas project that we talked about in November was approved by council, I think it was the 13th of November. And I believe I talked to Mason at UAMPS yesterday, and I believe the last 2 approvals in the overall UAMPS group are happening tonight. So hopefully tomorrow or Wednesday we'll know how we've fared on the overall getting to the 85% subscription. He felt confident that we'd hit that or exceed it a little bit. So that was good news to get yesterday. So that's moving forward on the UAMPS side of things. Jake and we've sent to UAMPS, I guess a plan, if you will, of what we feel like we need to purchase from now until we get those plants online. And so they're working on getting us some pricing back on that. So hopefully by next month, we might be able to report of what the offers were and if how they seem. So and that would address the bulk of certainly 8 to 9 months of the year. We'll still have to do some smaller purchases over the summer peaks, but that is what we targeted with that solicitation. So our October peak was 38 megawatts, which was the highest October. In comparison, our next closest in 2022 was 29, so we were 8 megawatts, a little more than 8 megawatts higher in October because of those 105-degree days that we had. So the generators did run, so this is kind of a 2-month report. The generators did run 4 to 5 hours a day through about the middle of October. Gas prices was favorable, and so they were able to run and save some money on that. The Nebo plant, fortunately, they had their annual scheduled, or their fall outage scheduled for the latter part of October instead of the early part, which worked out well that we were able to have it online during the hotter period. And but that plant outage went well. It's back online and doing well. Grapevine Substation, mostly what we're doing there is ordering materials and getting bids. We've actually received the reclosers physically, are the first pieces that we've received. The battery system and relay panels, we've received the bids for the battery, evaluating those, and the relay panels. We've got those bids back but I haven't got the recommendation from ICPE back, so we'll be issuing the purchase orders for those as we go on. Their next step on the sub will be having a construction package that would basically be the foundations and ground grid and below and conduits, below grade stuff, which I'm hoping we'll have by the end of the month, that we could send that out and actually get some bids on starting some construction in there. On the transmission lines that go in, we sent those bids out last Wednesday, and we've given them till the end of December to get those bids back. And so kind of developing piles of material so we can actually do something. On the AMI, we're progressing there. The DCUs are supposed to ship on December 20th, which is the data collection units. There will be 6 of them scattered around town that will talk to the meters. And then we're supposed to see our first, they call them FAT, factory acceptance test meters. They'll send us like 8 meters and we'll get them talking to the DCUs. And so we'll put those on city facilities and test it from that. And then when we get the next shipment, then we'll gradually start deploying those, and we may talk to some of you to be willing to put those on your homes, and that way we can real time figure it out, and if there's any issues, we can work with you. And instead of, I don't want to put hundreds of meters out and find out there's a hiccup in the software somewhere. We want to run that through, shall we say, friendly folks.
We seem friendly.
Most people are friendly. Understanding folks, how about that? So as far as a larger deployment, it'll probably be Q2 of next year before that starts to ramp up. So, but the meters are on order. We have a schedule for the next 2 years really of meters coming in. So making progress there. We have a call at least weekly with Aclara, see where we're at. So the GIS utility network upgrade, which is our mapping system, and it ties into our inventory and asset management system. I talked to Tyler. He came in and talked to me earlier this afternoon, and we've actually made the data conversion from the old system to the new system, and now it's really close, Rachel, to being back online. So we've had to put a pause on it from when they took the data and did the conversion till now. So it'll probably be first part of next week that will be quote unquote back to normal. But it looks really neat, and I think it'll have a lot of great capabilities. It has a different look, but I think the crews will really like it. And hopefully one of the meetings we can actually kind of bring it in and maybe show you a little demo of how it works and why it's beneficial. So that upgrade's actually gone probably a little smoother than we'd anticipated. I probably shouldn't say that.
Jinx it.
But it's went really well. The consultants worked with us well. So the SCADA upgrade that's in the budget, we've issued the PO. Steve with our IS department is working on buying the new server and going through those things. So we're working on those. One of the projects that we're working on, you probably don't notice it because it's in the middle of where they're widening Red Hills Parkway towards St. George, so west of Green Springs. They're gonna widen that to 4 lanes. So when we saw that, we're putting in some conduits that we hadn't really planned on this year, but while things are tore up, it makes sense. to get the conduits in to where we can probably put in the budget next year to put the cable in, and we'll give a better backfeed to that pocket over there, Canyon Breeze, and that little industrial area. Right now, it's on old direct buried cable, and
Conduit's
it's
better.
been working, but it's
Yeah.
we know it's at near its end of its useful life. So we were able to get in there and work with Public Works to get those conduits in. So the little track hoe to the side is our guys, not all the big stuff. So. Solar applications, we had 6 in November. It looks like things are ramping up for the end of the year rush like it usually does. People trying to get their tax credits, and we'll do our best to get as many through as we can before the end of the year. On our pole attachment policy, I did receive comments back from TDS yesterday. I haven't looked at them, so we'll see where that goes. Lumen's been kind of quiet. We have worked with them on a smaller project on the west side, but as far as the contract side of things, they haven't really responded much beyond our initial. So on our wholesale power costs and PCA, fortunately, the good news continues. Our average cost for October was about 7.5 cents compared to, you can see it, the year before was 11, year before that at 8, and it even beat 3 years ago. So that's good. And you can see, I anticipate that we'll be able to beat the previous year in these next 2 months. But then we're going to roll up to this 8 cents, flatten out at that point, because I think that's where we'll be for the foreseeable future and in the next 6 months or so. And so what that does to the PCA is it continues the downhill slide, and right now it's at 1.3 cents over here. Negative 1.3 cents, yes. That's a good emphasis.
It's a good trajectory.
So, well, I think it probably will. So basically, if our current year comes in less than the previous year, it will go down. If it goes up, but so I think this 11 and 10 cents that we had in November, December of last year, I think our costs for this year are going to be less on those two. And then come January, we're going to be, in order for it to go down, we'd have to beat what we've had this year, which has been pretty favorable. So I think come January is where we'll probably see somewhat of a flattening of the PCA. So I suspect it'll get maybe around 1.5 cents negative, and then it will probably flatten in there for a little while. This is the peak load. Again, the purple line is this year, with the exception of the weird September we had 2 years ago. You can see we've been well above the previous years on almost every month this year. I don't know why it's doing that. And there's the 38 megawatts that we had compared to previous Octobers. It's dramatically higher. But so far, well, November, I think this is an actual number now. I don't think we hit any higher than that. So it was about average November. And last but not least, again, because of October being warm at the front, the average usage for residential customer is higher than most years. There looks like 2019 was a little higher. Again, on, as far as outages and stuff, again, knock on wood, been pretty fortunate that way. Our bird friends are back. We've got quite a few, we've got more things covered up in the subs than we did last year. I should have put that picture on here that Jessica sent me at Main Street. I mean, the whole structure was just entirely covered with birds. And so we've bought, what do they call it, a chirper? They make some sort of predatory sound for them. We put that in Parkway and Main Street. And then Jake had went online and found that there's a real high-end one that's supposed to scare them off. It kind of uses the laser.
Ooh,
So-
Lazar.
So he went, well, it's not to zap them, it's just to scare them. I mean, it didn't fry them. And so he got to thinking and says, well, I have my Christmas thing at home. And so he took it up to, I don't remember which sub, and it seemed to scare him away. So went to Home Depot or wherever and bought a couple of little laser Christmas things and put in the subs. Not super scientific, but I'll take any fewer birds is gonna reduce the chances, so. We do what we can and try to be creative. We've got fake owls that we've stuck up, but after a while, they just sit on and.
Normally the birds like to land on those.
Yeah. So we've tried different things. Jake's got the remaining cover we need for some of the arresters on order. When they come in, we have to schedule an outage of the sub to put them on, but we'll continue to keep covering up more and more as we can. But we have seen a fair number of birds at Parkway and Main Street, so. I think we talked through most of the main UAMPS items. Probably one of the, in fact, I don't think I brought it up here, but I put in your packet, I believe, the scholarships that go with Solar 1A and 1B. So if you know any high school kids that might be interested, let them know. They have to be on our system, so not only just live in Washington, they have to live on Washington City system to qualify. And then UAMPS was going to be contacting the high schools in the area. Yeah, UAMPS was going to directly reach out to, I would assume it'll be, St. George participates in the project, so it would be, I think, and Hurricane does as well. So probably, I think all the high schools in the county will be contacted and made aware of that, so. And obviously, depending on the number that turn in, affects their chances and opportunities. But that's built into the contract with both those steel solar projects, as they'll, I want to say it's $10,000 a year. And I think they're planning on dividing it into 4 per project, so 8 total $2,500 scholarships. So. Probably the one other thing at UAMPS level, we'll have a meeting next week on it, is our transformer capacity on the UAMPS system at Skyline, River, and it also includes St. George's Green Valley sub. The 138 to 69 capacity, we're starting to bump up to some issues. If we were to lose one of those, it would be, we could transfer load, but it would take a bit instead of the adjacent transformer just taking it over. So in the next 4 to 5 years, we're going to need to be putting bigger transformers and or more transformers in to address. That's just a UAMPS system issue. And of course, that will impact the cost that's associated with that project. So, and so ICP's done a study, made some recommendations. They presented last month. We gave them some comment back, and they're supposed to present the final study, I think it's next Wednesday. And then along with that, come up with a budget plan and a timing. Because I don't think we want to bite it all off at once. It's total estimates around 25 million between all the transformers and the substation improvements that are needed. So we'll try to stage that in. Good news is some of those bonds for that project will be paid off. I want to say it's in late 26, early 27. So the timing there is fairly good, that would free up some cash to most likely we'll have to bond at that level. So I think we've recovered most of the other UAMP stuff, with the main thing being the natural gas. Oh, one thing in my notes here, the prepay that we approved, goodness, it was probably almost a year ago. They finally were able to get the differential to the 8%, and it actually closed in November. And so those savings, so it's on the Red Mesa and Steel Solar projects, on the energy, and on Nebo, the fuel. So not the overall project, but the fuel component, we should see about an 8% reduction starting in April. So through that. So that's taken a while to get there, but and we're continuing looking at we approved a study project for geothermal at Cold Fort, and we'll see where that goes. Is probably the other new projects that and they're still working on the Fremont Solar to get things worked out with Rocky Mountain and or the developer with some of the transmission issues on that project. That's why it's kind of been in limbo for a little while. So I really think that's pretty much all I have at this point, unless you have questions for me. And I do appreciate your time and your support. And again, if you got questions on the impact fees, shoot me an email, a text, call, whatever. We'll get them answered.
Okay, thanks, Rick. Are there any questions, comments, concerns that we've got? Okay.
I guess you'd like to adjourn.
We're just looking for a motion to adjourn then.
Okay. Ben Meyer, I make a motion, we adjourn.
I'll second that motion. Andy.
Andy seconded, Dick motion. Todd, do you want to give us a vote?
Sure. Spriggs, aye.
Andy,
Palmer, aye.
Dick,
Saunders, aye.
Dinsmore, aye. So we will adjourn. Our next meeting will be January 7th, 2025.
Unbelievable.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you, everybody. We'll see you then.
Thank you. Bye.